Dr. Anthony Lewis was born in Northern Ireland and grew up during the Troubles. He was indeed an altar boy at his local Catholic church, but I kind of laughed about this because it echoed my own experience as a child. He probably asked too many questions to feel beloved by the clergy. Um, he studied geophysics at Durham, where he picked up a PhD, and then spent 30 years looking for and indeed finding hydrocarbons across the world. He's now retired. He's chair of Windsor Humanists Sackway, and he is a passionate advocate of innovation, science, and new technology. And he's going to speak about OneLife, exploring humanism. Thank you, Anthony.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I'm honoured to be here with you today to give the eighth Interfaith lecture in the series organised by Southeast Faith Forum. Today I'll be talking about my personal perspective on humanism, which is a growing non-religious belief system in the UK. The national census in 2021 indicated that nearly 40% of people in the UK now see themselves as non-religious. And this proportion is larger than any single religious denomination. But of course, many of these nones wouldn't actually identify themselves as humanist. But nevertheless, it is still important that there is a wider understanding of the non-religious perspective. And humanism is as good a place to start this evening as any, because it is one of the more well-established non-religious traditions and stretches right back to ancient Greek, Rome, India, and even China. Hopefully my talk today will contribute to a better understanding of what being non-religious means today. And I just want to say right at the outset, despite being non-religious, I believe that I live a good ethical life. And I hope at the end of today's presentation, you might agree with me. I just need to get used to the, there we go. I'm controlling the slides myself. So I've divided the talk into 4 parts, about 7-8 minutes on each section. I'll start briefly to introduce a bit more about myself so you understand why I now call myself a humanist and how I came to be talking to you today. I'll summarize the main aspects of humanism on a single slide, humanism in a nutshell. And following this, I'll highlight how humanists find purpose and meaning to our lives without the promise of an afterlife. I'd then like to celebrate humanity and our advances and successes, because we are truly a remarkable species. And in the process, I'll explain why the Enlightenment period some 300 years ago is really important to humanists. And I'm particularly looking forward to the Q&A session at the end, which Stephen will chair. And hopefully I'll meet the objectives. So moving on, just to give a bit more detail on my background and how I became a humanist, I'll use this picture montage to introduce myself, starting from my childhood at the top left and the present day on the bottom right. As Stephen said, I grew up an English Catholic in a small town called Limavady in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. So I experienced at first hand how religions, if we let them, can divide us and drive people to be violent to each other. I was an altar boy for only 2 years as I went to a Catholic primary school, but this short career was brought to a rather abrupt end by Father McGarvey, the parish priest, when I started asking too many questions, which he thought were quite precocious for an 11-year-old. I stopped going to Mass as a result of that, but my Irish granny, who went to Mass every morning, was asked to do an intervention. And we actually ended up having a very honest conversation about faith and non-existence, because I'd officiated at many funerals in my short 2-year altar boy career. And I just observed that people that didn't come to church very often appeared to cope better at funerals of their loved ones than those that came to church often. And in my precocious young head, I surmised that perhaps this was because people didn't really believe in an afterlife after all. Otherwise, why would they be so upset? So after some very fraught discussions with my granny, She eventually admitted that she wasn't sure if an afterlife existed either, but that it was part of her faith to believe in an afterlife, and it helped her cope with the existential burdens of non-existence and the mystery of existence. So we basically agreed to disagree, and she suggested with a glint in her Irish eyes that I stopped obsessing about non-existence, as it was going to happen anyway, and that it would be better that I concentrated on making the most of my life before the inevitable end of it, which unfortunately comes to us all. I'm not sure if she reported back to Father McGarvey, but the pressure for me to attend Mass every Sunday sort of fizzled out after this. However, she did conclude our interaction with a very wise perspective that has stayed with me all my life, and did help assuage my existential worries at the time. She pointed out that trying too hard to understand your own non-existence is as impossible as it is for us to physically kiss our own elbow. She pointed out there are just some things that are not possible in life, like the eye cannot see itself, and truly touching our non-existence is one of them. So she strongly urged me instead to just get on with things and make the most of my life whilst I still could. And her voice still rings in my head now, and that is exactly how I've lived my life. As a result, thanks to my granny, I have actually probably been a humanist from the age of 11, although I did not know that this approach to life had that name until very recently. However, I still always carry a deep sense that unfortunately all our lives are rather brutally bookended by a non-existence, both before we're born and after we die. Luckily, soon after my granny's intervention, I ended up getting very interested in geology because my great uncle Jimmy, my granny's elder brother, brought me a fossilized bark of a tree when he visited us from California. And thanks to him, this sparked my interest in the rocks. And as Stephen's already explained, I went all the way and did a PhD. And I had a 30-year career exploring for oil and gas, a career which I adored. And I've worked in over 20 countries in Asia, the Middle East, North Africa, Europe, and Americas. And I've met some wonderful, amazing people on the way from all faiths, cultures, and ethnicities. And what I've found, wherever you go worldwide, if you treat people well, they tend to reciprocate and treat you well too, on the whole. And the pictures on the right above are of me at two well sites in the Sahara Desert. They were unsuccessful wells. I only formally realized I was a humanist in 2014 after retiring, when I attended the World Humanist Congress in Oxford with my husband Rick. That's us in the bottom right, a bit behind me. We've been together for 25 years. We both grew up Catholic, but had been atheists most of our lives. And we spent a great weekend at the Congress listening to speakers like Richard Dawkins, Anthony Grayley, the Nigerian writer Wole Soyinka. And after the Congress, we decided that we were humanists, and we joined the Humanist UK. And with some other local humanists, we set up Windsor Humanists. And through Windsor Humanists, we've made many non-religious, but also religious friends through our involvement with the interfaith groups and sitting on our local sacrament. I've also been on the local BBC radio a few times, written the occasional thought for the week for local papers, and even given the prayers a couple of times at the start of the Royal Borough full council meetings. So being involved and getting involved in humanism has been a great success for Rick and I personally, as we now feel more connected to our local area in more ways than we could ever have envisaged. I've also been into more than 50 local schools to talk about humanism and my passion for science. And quite often when I ask for a show of hands from the pupils, they indicate that many are from non-religious backgrounds, although this proportion varies from 100% for some classes in South Ascot, for example, and 100% from religious families in Slough. And this huge local diversity, even in our local area of Windsor, is why dialogue sessions like today are so important. And so and it's important for us all to get to know each other and understand our different life choices and perspectives. So that's why I'm here today to talk about my humanism, so that when someone says to you that they are a humanist, hopefully after this evening, you will know a little bit better about what it is they're telling you. And also in the future, perhaps if someone asks you, what is humanism? You might be able to give them a really good answer. So before summarizing humanism in a nutshell, I'd like to make two final points before we start. At no time this evening am I attacking anyone else's sincerely held faiths, beliefs, or religion. Rather, what I am doing is describing my own worldview and beliefs as a humanist. We all have to find our own path in life as we all face the burdens of existence. So it's important that we all respect the different paths that we all choose to take. The central picture in the montage is me with two of my sisters on my last day at secondary school when I still had hair. Alex on the right is still to this day a devout Catholic, and Gillian on the left is an occasional, attends Mass occasionally. But despite these differences we still love each other dearly. And it is in that spirit of mutual respect and tolerance that I'm talking to you this evening. So hopefully now you got a little bit more about my background and where I'm coming from. But I just want to say before we jump into humanism, just one other final point. I have a scientific background and I don't have a background in ethics or theocracy. So my presentation is going to major a little bit more on the science side than the philosophical, because that's where my expertise lies. So this is humanism in a nutshell. And before I start, when you get humanists together, we often joke that if you get 20 humanists in a room, you will often find that you get at least 20 different opinions about everything. This is because we think for ourselves and there's no central authority, there's no holy books, foundational texts, we don't do regular worship, we have no buildings, nor do we have any doctrinal requirements to follow. But despite this free-flowing approach, most humanists would agree on the following 5 key principles or beliefs. We even disagree on what you would actually call them. And they're illustrated in the 5 strips, vertical strips. So if we just take each strip in turn, the first strip is about the golden rule. Humanists believe that we can all live a good life according to the golden rule, i.e. to treat others the way you want to be treated. And scientists have actually observed the golden rule, they call it reciprocal altruism, operating in other social creatures such as apes, elephants, dolphins. And even evolutionary biologists have demonstrated using mathematical game theory that the golden rule is actually an effective optimal strategy for individual creatures living as a social species to pass their genes on to the next generation, because it balances the need to compete with the need to cooperate for a social creature living in ever larger social groups. So it's not surprising then that the golden rule sits at the core of most religions. For example, love thy neighbor is a very strong core tenet in Christianity. As a result, despite the specific doctrinal differences between the religions, there is a huge area of common ground between them and the non-religious. There's so much overlap across all the different faiths and the non-religious than the differences that perhaps we sometimes focus too much on. So humanists believe strongly that being kind and treating others well, according to the golden rule, does build a better, happier life for the greatest number of people. So moving on to the second strip, humanists look to science and reason. Humanists believe that reality is a wholly natural place and consists of what we can observe and directly experience. Humanists do not see any evidence for a supernatural realm or the divine. Humanists believe that science is the proven best way to understand the universe and reality around us and our origins. Through science, we now know that the universe started at the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago, and that all life has evolved over the last 4.6 billion years. This means that we are all literally made of stardust. I think science has provided us with many inspiring stories about our origins, which are based on evidence and which also help us to understand our place in the universe. We'll come back to this aspect later when we celebrate human progress. So the third strip is human compassion. Humanists believe that morality is not absolute, nor God-given on tablets of stone or derived from divine revelation. Instead, humanists believe that our morality draws on our evolved natural sense of empathy and compassion, which can be used to guide us on deciding what is right and wrong, rather than on relying on what was written down in ancient texts many millennia ago, when many ethical norms were very different than those we have today. Human morality has progressed through time due to the march of civilization, an improving ethical outlook, and to the spread of the rule of law, which have enabled us to increasingly bring our more primitive violent instincts under more and more control. Although you only have to look at the daily news to appreciate that we've still got a long way to go in this regard. The fourth strip, and this goes back to the intervention that my granny made, is about this one life. Humanists also believe that our lives are bookended by non-existence before birth and after death, and that we're all mortal, evolved creatures, and that we are our physical bodies. Humanists believe, therefore, that we should focus on making the most of this one life that we know about and can experience directly. We consider that this one life is it for all of us. We do not believe that our existence is a rehearsal for any sort of afterlife or future reincarnation, or even a divine test of some sort. We believe it is up to us individually to find our own meaning and purpose. We will explore how humanists do this in a moment. Humanists recognize that we all have a right to make the most of this rather precious short period of existence that we all have whilst we're alive. But obviously we must not do this at the expense of others, as they too have an equal right to make the most of their precious one life. This is why humanists believe strongly in the importance of mutual respect and tolerance, understanding that everyone will make different life choices, and that so long as they do not harm others, we all have a right to find our own path in life. And finally, the fifth strip is thinking for ourselves. So going back to getting 20 humanists in a room. As pointed out earlier, humanists do indeed think for themselves, and as a result like to debate and often disagree, sometimes quite strongly about many things from science, philosophy, politics, economics, you name it. This is why humanists firmly champion freedom of speech, as we believe it is essential for us to be able to, through dialogue and robust debate, find the compromises required to manage our complex societies. And through open debate, challenging bad ideas, but in the process also strengthening the good ideas. Humanists also support strongly the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which puts the primacy of individual human rights above collective rights. Humanists, as a result, are robust supporters of secular democracy and the rule of law. They believe that these are the best approaches humans have invented so far to avoid tyranny. Humanists are also strong secularists who believe that there should be freedom for all religions, but also, importantly, freedom from religion, and that no religion or belief system has the right to impose itself on those who do not adhere to its doctrines. As the strapline says at the bottom, humanists are atheists or agnostic, as we do not believe in the existence of a divine realm to reality. So we're materialists in philosophical terms. But despite this, we do have a faith. We have a very strong faith in human reason and compassion, and that our future and continuance as a species is firmly in our own hands. As Carl Sagan, the famous American astronomer and humanist, said, "There is no one or anything else in the universe that is coming to save us from ourselves. Our survival and future destiny is very much in our own hands." So that's humanism in a nutshell. So to summarize then, humanists believe that we should use our heads to make reasoned choices, using evidence and reason, and our hearts to empathize with ourselves and others, based on our shared humanity and evolved sense of compassion, using our minds to think and our hearts to care. I'd like now to explore how humanists find meaning and purpose to our lives without the promise of an afterlife. So humans are probably the first creatures to evolve an awareness of our own mortality and also the first to have the means to talk to each other about this awareness. The conscious realization that our existence is contingent and our demise a certainty is a scary thing for all of us at the individual and even at the group level. This mortality salience, as scientists call it, is an unsettling side effect of our evolved cognitive capabilities. And some anthropologists now think perhaps we represent a unique cognitive singularity in the evolution of life on Earth. Nature, in some ways, has equipped us through evolution with the mental faculties required to survive in a dangerous natural world where suffering and death are unavoidable consequences of actually being alive. But unfortunately, it's not equipped us with the cognitive capabilities to deal with existential burdens of being conscious of both our own personal insignificance in the greater scheme of things and our inevitable death. As I mentioned earlier, I have, from a very young age, always doubted that anyone has the answers to the mystery of existence. Man has developed a whole kaleidoscope of ideas, metaphysical philosophies, beliefs, and faiths in an attempt to assuage these existential terrors. But for me, the pragmatic approach of humanism, of inverting these existential concerns about mortality back towards a focus on the one life that we actually do know about and directly experience, has always made more sense to me than, for example, any promises of an uncertain afterlife or rebirth. So finding meaning and purpose to your lives does then become a lot easier for a humanist, because we are all endowed with powerful corporal capabilities that can provide us with many ways to create life-enhancing purpose and fulfillment, as illustrated in the three circles. We can forge meaningful relationships with other human beings using our social brains. We can engage our cognitive abilities in the pursuit of intellectual understanding and get involved in a whole raft of cultural pursuits. We can enjoy the full range of sensory experiences provided by our physical bodies. So just taking each of these very briefly in turn, with our social brain, we can connect with other fellow human beings at a deep and authentic level, which can be a magical experience, whether with family, partners, wider community through volunteering. Being social is one of the strongest drivers of human behavior, as testified by the importance of our artistic and social endeavors and the enduring primacy of our familiar bonds of love. Neuroscientists estimate that 80% of our brains are actually used to manage our emotions and social connections. To put it simply, developing meaningful
Have they
connections
already started it?
with other human beings during our lives makes life worth living and has a deeply life-enhancing purpose all to itself. With our cognitive brain, so our thinking brain, we can develop our cognitive and intellectual abilities through cultural pursuits, science, the arts, education, learning, and all our deeply rewarding activities for all of us. Connecting with the cultural life of our communities and societies is a dominant pursuit for most of us, and humanists are no different, and they are all deeply fulfilling ends in themselves. This lecture series is just one example. We all get great pleasure stimulating our cognitive brains, which sit in our prefrontal lobes in our head, especially scientists like me. So with our physiology, our physical bodies, we can enjoy the experiences of being embodied, which is probably the most powerful driver of life and fulfillment. We can use our bodies to play sport, play instruments, dance, paint, cook, hug, enjoy physical contact with other living creatures. As reproductive animals, it goes without saying, in an adult audience, we're able to enjoy the carnal pleasures. Our physiology provides powerful biochemical rewards for us when we use our physical bodies. For example, the runner's high or the euphoria experience when dancing. Interacting with reality in the natural world through our bodily senses is therefore also another profoundly life-enhancing activity for us as sentient embodied creatures. And if you throw all the three brain ways of finding meaning in life together, in addition to what I've said, each of us has our own separate conscious experience of the world, mediated through our bodily senses. All of us, even atheists, experience moments of deep connection with reality and nature when we marvel at the wonder of existence, what for example, watching a beautiful sunset, listening to music that moves us after the birth of a child. These experiences are often termed spiritual or even transcendental and are a normal part of the human experience. Feeling spiritual is part of being alive. However, it is understood in very different ways. By the non-religious like me, it's interpreted as a deeply felt and wonderful emotion, but a wholly embodied experience. But for the religious, it's seen as a connection to the supernatural or evidence of a divine presence. But such spiritual experiences can offer an interfaith bridge to help us talk to each other about our life experiences, despite these different interpretations of their meaning. We can all wonder at the majesty of existence and enjoy the beauties and challenges of life together, sharing our own moments of wonderment, moments that often make life worth living and which can be very, very special indeed. To conclude, then, humans like me are free to seek out our own meaning and purpose to our lives, drawing on these embodied corporal and cognitive capabilities. All are ends and meanings in themselves, and they all bring their own existential rewards and satisfactions. And of course, all can be experienced directly by everyone, regardless of faith, belief, or background. What I'd like now to do as a born optimist, I'd like to celebrate human progress. So to end today's exploration, I'd like to celebrate in an optimistic way the miracle of human progress, which has been achieved through our human ingenuity. We are incredibly good at innovating as a species. We've invented tools, technologies, complex economies and societies to progressively improve the quality of life of more and more people. As a born optimist, I do not think we acknowledge enough how incredible we are. So I'd like to end this evening's lecture with some positivity. The exponential curve plotted on the slide above my head is a very simplified visualization of mankind's incredible progress. The graph has time along the bottom, a bit of science here on a log scale with 2 million years on the left and the present day on the right. The vertical axis represents the positive improvements there have been, especially the acceleration and the innovation over the last 300 years across a huge number of areas of human activity, from improvements in health, wealth, education, spread of democracy, women's emancipation, reductions in poverty, reductions in violence. The list is a long one. More details can be found in the website, Our World in Data, which is a charity based in Oxford, which has a mission to publish the data to help humanity make progress. The small inset graph on the top left plots the exponential rise of GDP over the last 200 years, just as one example of the data that's contained in this on this website. So looking at this exponential curve, the flat part of the curve illustrates that most early humans never saw any significant change nor improvements during their lifetime. And if we look at the present day on the right, we are living in a time of extraordinary fast change as represented by the rising curve. It is common now for people, particularly our generation, to witness unimaginable change several times in the span of a single lifetime. Human progress in between those two end members has proceeded episodically in two main periods of accelerated innovation, so often called the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago and the industrial revolution, which started about 500 years ago. The ratcheted lines on the plot during the various periods of revolution were times of huge societal disruption as the old ways of doing things were replaced by new ways and new technologies. These long-term trends and acceleration are what President Obama often called the incredible arc of progress, and they are mostly positive for humanity. But this message often gets drowned out by our daily news cycle of immediacy and woe, driven by our innate higher sensitivity to threats rather than opportunities. But I would obviously say that as an optimist. But let's pick two aspects to focus on briefly to illustrate these positive trends in a bit more detail. let's look at take this curve as representing both life expectancy and the increase in the amount of human knowledge, which have both grown exponentially in a similar way to the GDP curve on the top left. So let's start 2 million years ago and look at what life was like for the average person alive during the Stone Age. Steven Pinker, the neuroscientist and humanist, has described in his book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, that our hunter-gatherer existence was actually brutal and short for almost the entirety of the first 2 million years. The average lifespan of a Stone Age male was around 30 to 35 years due to high infant mortality, and at least a third of children did not reach 5 years of age until very recently. From studying the bones of early man, anthropologists have also made the shocking discovery that up to nearly 50% of males who reach maturity as adults during this Paleolithic period died at the hands of other men, which was a shocking result because it appears that humans are uniquely violent to each other when compared to other creatures. It is a sad truism that the spread of civilization has been the story about bringing these violent instincts of mainly the male of our species under increasing control through the rule of law, cultural norms, and the spread of civil society. Our wars and prison populations, however, attest to the challenges that still remain. But even so, it is true that the world is a lot less violent today than it was in the past, despite the impression you might get on the daily media. So early man's natural state was one we would now consider today to be destitution and poverty. The miracle is how we've been able to lift ourselves out of these brutal origins through the progressive inventions and technologies, improving healthcare, sanitation, housing, creating wealth, plus finding better ways to cooperate with each other through social progress, as represented by the rising curve towards the present day on the right. And nowadays, our average lifespan, for example, in the UK sits somewhere around 82, 83 years of age, and worldwide to a figure higher than 75, which is slowly increasing. The low base of the graph towards the left also represents the lower amount of knowledge that early man possessed. In the Stone Age, all knowledge and know-how had to be passed down the generations through the oral traditions using song and myth, given that writing had not been invented. The rising curve towards the right represents the rapid explosion in human knowledge in the last 300 years. Incredibly, all of us can now hold the whole of human knowledge in our hands on our mobile phones. When I was a child at school, if we wanted to know something, we had to go to the local library and look it up in an encyclopedia. And if the information wasn't in the encyclopedia, that was it. We had nowhere else to go to find the answers to our questions. But now, of course, any of us can Google any question and get the answer in seconds. And this is truly remarkable that's happened in our lifetime. And most of us already take it for granted. What I'd like now to do is just briefly look at the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution and explain why the industrial revolution is so important to humanists. So looking back at the agricultural revolution, that was the period when early humans started to settle into permanent dwellings and began to domesticate animals and wild crops. Our diets improved and became more reliable than our previous hunter-gatherer existence. But even so, life expectancy didn't really increase significantly. And this was because we ended up catching lots of diseases by living in close proximity to the recently domesticated animals. And we still suffer from a lot of those diseases today. For example, flu came from birds, and we've had the recent example of COVID mutating from fruit bats in around 2000. During this period, humans also in the agricultural revolution invented writing to record farm surpluses and started experimenting with early money systems to replace bartering. It was during this period that most of the major religions emerged. Early writing methods gave scholars at the time the tools to be able to write down the previous oral myths and histories. Eventually, these were compiled and eventually became the holy books like the Bible and Quran. So for many humanists, these books represent important historical documents, which summarize the totality of human knowledge and wisdom at that time. And they do capture some timeless and beautiful wisdoms about life. For millennium afterwards, those who controlled these revered documents jealously guarded them and held a significant sway over early societies. So things changed in the Industrial Revolution, which began with the invention of the contraption pictured, which is the Gutenberg press, invented by Gutenberg in 1436, which improved the early manual methods developed in China and Korea. This invention set off a chain reaction process of democratizing the access to knowledge and ideas that previously been jealously guarded by state authorities and religions. It led directly to an intellectual flourishing in the arts, technology, business, and development of a whole slew of new approaches to understanding nature and human society. This period is often termed the Enlightenment, as it's when the scientific method was formalized, when the modern ideas about equality and liberal democracy emerged. It was when the modern banking and financial systems were established, which broke the power of the monarchies and state monopolies on economic activities. The Industrial Revolution completely transformed the trading and economic activities globally and allowed us to progressively improve the lives of increasing numbers of people. And the two gentlemen pictured there are Isaac Newton and Leonardo da Vinci, and they're representing just two of the great thinkers from this period who had a huge impact. The Enlightenment is considered by humanists to be an important turning point in human affairs, and you'll hear humanists talk a lot about the Enlightenment as it represents the inflection point of human progress, as you can see by the curve. So coming to the present day, the information revolution that we're all currently living in is the beginning of another great disruption. And because it's further democratizing access to knowledge. If we look at the young today, they are the first generation to have this easy access to the entirety of human knowledge online. And they're also the first generation to be consistently educated globally to at least secondary school level, over 80% according to the UN, through a few dark spots in sub-Saharan Africa. They are also the biggest generational cohort there will ever be in human history due to last century's population explosion and the current declining birth rates worldwide. And as President Obama and others have pointed out, it is likely this golden generation, or Generation Unlimited, as the UN calls them, will drive another wave of accelerated innovation during their lifetimes over the next 30 to 40 years. That's provided that their enthusiasm and potential is not dimmed or hindered by the dystopian pessimism that's currently very prevalent in society and unfortunately being amplified by social media, in my view. As one example of a reason for optimism, of many that I could talk about, is the woman pictured on the top right, who won a Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2021 for her innovations. She's Professor Anne Duda, and she's considered by some to be one of the greatest living scientists no one has ever heard of. I'm not sure how many people have heard of her, but she'll probably be up there with the greats like Isaac Newton in the future. She pioneered the development of the CRISPR gene editing method, which can be used to study disease genetics. And for example, the CRISPR technology was used to develop the recent COVID and malaria vaccines, and the malaria vaccines have been rolled out and will save tens of millions of lives worldwide. Her invention will also lead to further improvements in developing medical treatments for many existing incurable health conditions. You can read more about Professor Duda in Walter Isaacson's book, The Codebreaker, for anyone that wants to find out a bit more. So as a humanist, I believe that human progress will continue to improve exponentially as the information revolution really gets going and the Generation Unlimited has an increase in impact. Although as during the previous periods of accelerated innovation, it is going to be a bumpy, chaotic ride at times. But as Carl Sagan pointed out, our future survival as a species really is in our own hands and depends fundamentally on us continuing to innovate and succeed. And I hope I live long enough to see some of the results of what Generation Unlimited produce. I know many may not share my optimism, but I honestly believe that it's through fostering an optimistic spirit that we will continue our progress and solve the many challenges we still face. But I have also found in life, too, that if there is too much pessimism, okay, we can be realistic, but if there's too much pessimism, this can actually hold us back and even become self-fulfilling if we give it too much rein. And I like to think that humanists should be both a voice for reason and rationality, but also for positive hope for the future. I'd like now just to recap and some final words. So as we've seen, humanists are fundamentally free thinkers. Not all humanists will agree with everything I've said this evening, and we seek to deal with the world as we find it. Humanism is a belief framework that accepts that we're all mortal creatures and that our lives are not a rehearsal for an afterlife. Humanists choose to focus on this one precious life that we experience directly and strive to live authentically with good grace and humour. Humanists are freed from the existential burdens of over-contemplating our own mortality and inevitable demise so that we can find our own meaning and significance and live this one life to the full, both for ourselves and others. In some ways, humanism can be frustrating as well, because there are no rules, there's no guidelines, there's no clergy, there's no one in charge of us. Some things will work for some humanists, whilst other approaches will be better for others. We have to make up our own minds about our life goals and accept responsibility for our approach and decisions and be accountable for our actions. But as we have seen, we have a wealth of human knowledge and experience at our disposal. None of us are alone. We have our family and friends. We also have the thoughts of all the great scientists, innovators, philosophers, artists from throughout human history and from every culture. And we can pick and choose those we find most helpful to us. We can discuss matters with others, and we can apply critical thinking skills and mindfulness to help us if that works for us as an individual. I'd like to end with a poetic, succinct summary of the humanist perspective on life as written here. When the light bulb of our consciousness is on, make the most of our lives for ourselves and others. This one life is not a rehearsal. This is it. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope you found it interesting, perhaps. And I'll head back to Stephen, who's now going to chair the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you very much indeed. I was very, very happy to hear your degree of optimism. And I think your optimism is extremely sensible. It probably forgets that the very development of communication, the development of more global unity, means that humanity will advance that much faster because we share our ideas. And one thing that concerns me at the moment is the way that one or two of the big men, as you might say, are trying to return to the 1930s. And I actually have a question behind this, which is that you appear to believe, and I hope you're largely right, that the information revolution, the computer revolution, is all about better and more frequent information. But there also seems to be an awful lot of rubbish in there. I don't just mean pictures of cats. I mean leaders who talk of fake news and who seem to despise empiricism. So how should we behave in terms of upholding morality and upholding empiricism and upholding the proper spirit of scientific investigation rather than merely rubbishing it and using the very tools that science has produced to rubbish it?
Yeah, very difficult question to answer because it covers a lot. Um, yeah, unfortunately, social media particularly, 80% of it is garbage. And when I go into schools, I say that to the kids. And um, uh, but just like the after the invention of the printing press, you had the gutter leaflets, and it was a great period of turmoil where no one knew what printed material you could trust in that period. And we're living through that with just a different media. When you get this democratization of information, what it does, in my view, is it holds a mirror up to us. So all we're seeing is ourselves reflected back, and unfortunately, it's not a pretty sight at the moment. Um, but what I say to the kids is that their generation that are going to be most successful are the ones that are going to be able to sort out um, the seeds from the chaff and find the 15% of the stuff that's good and ignore the 80% of the self-generated garbage. Because a lot of the internet and the information is actually just recycled rubbish. But we're learning as we go, I think, and unfortunately, in my view, um, there will be dark forces that that will seek to exploit the confusion and uncertainty. But those of us with wiser heads need to speak up, I think.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Friends, please feel free to ask Anthony questions. And if I may make so bold, if you go to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see a tilted heart which says react. If you click on that, you will be given the opportunity to raise hand. If you press that lozenge, a hand will shoot up in the top left corner. And so we will know exactly in what order to pose your questions. Please go ahead. Dr. Doyle.
Thank you very much for a very, very interesting lecture. I'm also a chemical engineer or scientist. I read a book. I wish to God I wrote it down, the title and the author. It was talking about near-death experience and out-of-body experience, which sort of, to me, shows that we have a soul as well as the body. And in one example, it was a surgeon who went through a very, very serious operation.
Mm.
And after the operation, he had out of body experience. He described every single work that was done on him
Mm.
to his colleagues. Now that explains to me, scientifically we can't prove it,
Mm.
and that there is, as well as what you've explained, which we totally accept. By having a microscope, you can see a cell and so on. Have you any comments on that?
Yeah, I don't have a philosophical background. Maybe someone that does can help me here. But I believe that there's sort of three main mega groups of philosophies about metaphysical philosophies. There's the materialists, which humanists are, that the world is what you can see and observe, and there's nothing else. There's I can't remember the name of the people that think that the world is about the metaphysical, the supernatural, the subjective, and then there's the dualists who think it's a balance between the two. So yeah, um, Oh, and depending on where you're coming from in that spectrum, you'll interpret experiences in different ways. And I would probably still argue that there's probably a materialistic interpretation of what's happening there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. More questions, please. David, please.
Oh, good. I'm Anthony. Good to see you. We haven't spoken for a little while, but we are, of course, good friends. Now, your introduction to humanism, there was item 4 along the series 1 to 4. Life is a gift. Make it meaningful. Make it count. Life is a gift. Now, a gift implies a gifter, does it not?
No, I mean that very much in the neutral way of looking at it. It's it's like laughing is a gift. Laughter is a gift. Yeah. It doesn't mean that someone's given it to you. It's something you can do yourself.
So life is slightly less than a gift.
No, but it's a gift in the sense that the alternative compared to the alternative. I think everyone would agree with that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, there we are. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ladha.
I don't know when I got that title, but I think you meant me, didn't you, Dilip Ladwa?
I did.
Yes, sorry. Okay. Yeah, excellent presentation, Anthony. Love that. I hope you can make the presentation available, the PowerPoint. That'd be very useful as a summary. I'm just curious, you've been to so many schools. I'm just wondering how the children react to this. What humanism is. And I assume you don't do it as a comparative. You present it as the religion. Yeah. I just interested to see what kind of feedback you get. I mean, if you've done 50 schools, you probably got a lot of feedback.
And a lot of different schools, from Eton to Eden Girls Islamic Girls School to schools in Bracknell and South Ascot, which are mainly secular, non-religious. As most teachers will tell you, every class varies on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes I have see a hands and I don't actually get through the presentation because the kids are really into the science aspect. What surprised me was for example, the Eden Girls Islamic School, the girls were quite interested in my homosexuality and were curious, and they invited me back, as Emil and David knows, to give a talk about living life as a gay man. It's probably the hardest talk I've ever given because it was a lot more personal. But the presentation I gave today is obviously for adults. Depending on the age of the kids, it gets watered down or is a bit gentler in places. But I love the questions. Like, for instance, I take my, I'm going to sidestep the question a little bit, but I take my fossils in, which particularly younger kids always gets them excited. And I made the mistake the first time I presented to primary school kids was I handed the fossils round. I may as well not have been standing at the front of the classroom after that. So, you learn as you go along, things that work. But the thing that really gets the kids interested is asking questions about the fossils and about evolution, dinosaurs. I've got one or two dinosaur fossils, which always gets their interest. And I actually have frozen lightning from the Sahara Desert. They're called fulgurites, and that always blows their mind. And I get some great questions. Like one kid once said, if Fulgurites are made when lightning strikes the land, what happens when lightning strikes the oceans? And I didn't know the answer. So when you're presenting to kids, you have to be ready for the questions that you haven't even thought of.
Mm.
And I just love it. I would not have been able to get this opportunity to talk to kids in any other way if I hadn't got involved with humanism.
Mm. Do you, I mean, I know you're not doing a comparative, but do you think that children find it easier to follow what you're saying about humanism than perhaps other religions and other faiths?
Yeah. No, because sometimes I have had the odd pupil be upset because they come from a very religious background. So I learned very quickly to do a show of hands so I can gauge the classroom, and if so if a classroom is 80-90% from religious background, then obviously I'm a lot more gentler with some of the things that, for instance, the way I said them today.
Yeah.
Because we have to have mutual respect, and the last thing I want to do is to be upsetting anyone.
No, understood.
Yeah.
No, thank you. That's fascinating, though. Thank you. Excellent presentation.
Thank you, Anthony. Peter.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much, Anthony, for a wonderful presentation of our humanist beliefs. To introduce myself very briefly, I'm a humanist chaplain, a member of Anthony's group, and Anthony directed me to a university which needed a non-religious chaplain, and I said, I'm not a chaplain, I don't have any faith, and they said, come along, do your best, we need your help. So I've been doing that for 3 years, and I get lots of questions from young adults about spirituality and ethics, and I put my hand up because I wanted to comment in response to David's question about if life's a gift, does it imply a gifter? And the work that I've been doing recently on spirituality brings me very much to the question of gratitude. We have a wonderful existence, we're enjoying our brief moment in the sun, and who am I grateful to? It would be wrong of me as a human being not to be grateful for what I'm receiving, but very briefly, I feel that as humanists, we can be grateful for the experience we have from people, from nature, from the universe. Gratitude is we feel gratitude as much as we feel awe and wonder. These are natural phenomena that have evolved with us, and I'm grateful for the gift. There's nobody I can be grateful to for the gift of nature, but aren't I lucky to be one of the few humans that ever get the opportunity to experience it? And I just wanted to bring a response to David's question about a gift and a gifter, because there's a philosophical area of origin or ontology, which comes first, chicken or the egg. I mean, there's a good answer to that, which we're not here to do today. But I think the important thing is to understand that I can receive a gift and be grateful for that gift. It doesn't mean that somebody gave it to me. It's just that I've got it. Here I am enjoying it. So I'm sorry, I hope that made sense to everybody.
Yes, thank you. Did you want to comment on that, Anthony, or not?
I wish I hadn't put it on the slide now. Or maybe it was good that I did put it on the slide, but it's just like there's a great book called Why Is There Something Rather Than Nothing by John Holt, the American philosopher. It's a fantastic book. It's tongue-in-cheek, but he gets into some really deep philosophical waters. And he says there's considering that there's a purpose or reason or a guiding hand to existence, there's the optimists who say there must be, otherwise why does the universe exist? There's a pessimist like Richard Dawkins and the four horse riders of the apocalypse, atheists who say there's no evidence, so that's it. Why does the universe need a purpose? And then there's people like me who sit in the middle, and I can't remember what the name that John Holt used for this category, But I honestly believe that whether there's a purpose or not is immaterial, because I don't think our cognitive abilities are have evolved to the stage where we would ever be able to understand a purpose, even if one exists. But I suspect, as a humanist, that it's likely that our need for a purpose and a first cause is a reflection of our evolved limitations. Is where I sit on that spectrum.
Thank you. Emil, please.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's an observation in response to Dilip's question. How do the children take humanism? How do the children take other religion? We have been doing interfaith studies with children at different ages, and we have been doing British values programs as well, part of which is respect and understanding, tolerance of other faiths. And we have a project this year, it's going to be a second year. It is called Story Tent. And we have 6 tents in an environment. 12 children goes into a tent and hears a story on a particular theme. Last year it was friendship. This year it's going to be it is not fair. Last year we had quite interesting reactions from, or interactions, I would say. These are primary school children, year 5s. Our Buddhist storyteller had a really, really extraordinary reaction from children. Mostly Muslim. They couldn't and they wouldn't want to believe that there wasn't a God. Mm. So you don't have a God. They kept on asking the same question. I think it is the most important thing about interfaith dialogue, interfaith work, is challenging beliefs. When there is doubt, there is questions. Then you can reach the truth by asking questions. Certainty is the enemy. And most of those children come with their own certainties. And how the school is educating children is very important. If they bring questions, more questions, then they will be open-minded children. I mean, I don't know if this answers your question, Dilip, but Anthony, what do you think?
Like when I've been into Eden Girls Islamic School a few times now, several times, and the first time I presented humanism rather than being involved with the British values activities, 10 years ago or so, 6, 7 years ago, with you, Emil and David. I would say a third of the class were indifferent to me. They weren't paying attention. A third were quite antagonistic, but a third were really interested. So despite their family background, but the ones that were antagonistic, it was this non-belief in God, and they kept saying, but if you don't believe in God, what do you believe in? And I was prepared. I had a list. Well, I've got believe in all of these things that I've presented, but it was just that one. The belief in God was the sticking point. So I do agree with that. But I've been invited back, so I clearly haven't upset anyone too much.
Thank you. Any more questions at this moment? I wonder then if I could ask you another one, Anthony. The question that was asked about how do schools react to you, I've noticed that in Oxford schools that I've been into with humanist speaker, the children are actually usually very, very respectful of the humanist speaker because they've never heard of a humanist position before very often, and they are very polite about it and very positive about it, want to know more about it. many people will say that humanism is to an extent decayed religion, and that a particular humanist will have as things that he or she regards as moral, those things which the predominant religion in which she or he grew up regarded as moral, and that perhaps over time the force of that morality would decline. Now, I take it from what you're saying that actually you take a more sort of Descartesian view, that you start by thinking of who we are, where we are, what we know and what we don't know, and that from that you can always keep your morality fresh. Am I right?
Yeah, and I mean, I come at it from an evolutionary biology standpoint, understanding that we've evolved as a social creature, and therefore the way we are, we've evolved that way because it's important for our survival. And you know, as I said, you know, the golden rule, reciprocal altruism. We you know, biologists now have observed, zoologists have observed this behavior in other animals, and so it's likely that you know, to balance, because in the wild, you know, a creature that has to cooperate and live as a social species, well, it's innate for us to compete and eat each other in the wild. So to balance that need to compete with each other with the need to cooperate to survive as a group, the golden rule is actually, you know, has been demonstrated to be an optimal strategy. And the way I look at it positively, if you strip out all the doctrinal differences across all the religions, what you're left with, and I would say this obviously, is a humanist core. And it's no surprise because that's what we've needed to survive as a social species. So I would invert your argument, Stephen, in some ways.
It wasn't my argument. It was merely an observation of an argument I've heard a lot.
Yeah.
I also, this is a bit facetious, but I can't help answering Peter's question that, of course, as an evolutionary biologist, you know perfectly well that the egg came into existence well before the chicken. Any more questions, please? I feel like one of these auctioneers. You know, you have here a brilliant man and a brilliant exponent of one of the key belief systems that many of us don't know enough about. And I'm going to have to bring the hammer down if nobody else is bidding. So anyone? Alan, thank you.
Right. Well, just quickly commenting also as a humanist school speaker. Hi, Anthony.
Hi.
I tend to find that the humanist viewpoint, especially in these multi-faith forums, is very well received by most students, and typically is the first one to get a round of applause from the students. So by and large, they are very receptive. But I wanted to make a separate comment. Most religions are about community. And Anthony has very much presented the individualistic view of humanism, which is true. I mean, each of us comes to it in our own way, despite sharing all the core things that Anthony talks about. But humanism does do things in the community. So just like all of your other religions, we celebrate important events with funerals and with recognizing births, new lives coming into place, and recognizing deaths and marriage. So we are like that. We also come together in groups. So Anthony is chair of Windsor Humanists, and there are Reading Humanists and so on. And we do have a national organization which doesn't tell us what to believe, but it does organize the sorts of things that humanists are interested in, which is kind of supporting humanists when they are facing discrimination of any sort. And it also kind of celebrates achievements, lecture series describing interesting advances and so on. So we are a community as well, but we are jealous. Certainly, as a humanist, I am jealous of the fact that most organized religions have places of worship and get together and have ceremonies and celebrations. And we are, in a sense, we are more individualistic. We are developing some of these. But there is a contrast, let's say, with the arch community that most religions have. With humanists is much more a collection of individuals who come together, and we are developing a humanist community. Anthony, I don't know whether that waffle makes sense.
No, I had potentially a fifth slide which would have covered the celebrants and stuff, but obviously I wanted to keep it within certain time period for the presentation. But it's one of the things I miss about not being a Catholic is the community, because in rural Ireland, going to mass on a Sunday is a big part of the local community still, and I do miss that. I really do.
Thank you, Emma.
I would like to pass a message to Anthony talking about humanist community. Jeremy Rodell apologized. He really wanted to join, but he had to be somewhere else, and he says hello. He wanted the video recording, so I want to pass my message to everyone here. If you want the video recording of Anthony's marvelous talk, please leave your email address if I already don't have that. Put it in the chat so I can send it. As Stephen said, we have a YouTube channel. We are going to put it there. We also have a Facebook page. I'm going to put the link there as well, so you can share it with other people if you wanted to. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's actually wider than that. SEEFF very much values people who come with us for the ride. Some of you have come because you're friends of Anthony's. Bear in mind that the real positive effect of a lecture series like this is over time, that every 2 months, almost invariably the second Thursday of of an odd month, somebody either of a particular religion or somebody who has a particular theme related to human beliefs will talk about that particular perspective. So what we are anxious really is to invite people to sign up just to receive the invitations, because we wish to make a closer community, not quite as close as Alan has laid out, because obviously in many cases we're begging to differ. But what will make our society a truly civilized society is if we all support each other in our beliefs, not necessarily agree with them, but that we're willing to understand it. And that's what these lectures are about. So we'd very much like you to put your email, if you wouldn't mind, in the chat. So you don't have to come, but then we will send you the poster to the subsequent lecture, etc. So equally, if you have any suggestions as to a particular perspective, belief perspective, or a particular thematic approach which you've not yet heard from us, we'd love to receive that suggestions as well. So this is not the property of SEEFF. This is something under the management of SEEFF. But what we're trying to do is to ease the development of a civilized society, and in particular, detune the kind of heightened mutual resentments that we see at the moment. So please just add your address, if you wouldn't mind, to the chat, and we'll invite you. And again, for ideas, please put forward. Emma.
I'm sorry, I forgot to lower it. I have seen 3 email addresses so far. Thank you.
Okay, in that case, David.
Yes, I just wanted to check with you, Stephen. You said that every odd month. I hadn't realised that May was an odd month.
It's an extremely odd month. Rough winds do blast the darling buds of May, and we haven't even seen any warmth, let alone darling buds yet, but we're still seeing the rough winds. Yeah, forgive me. I meant odd in the sense of not being even. We started in January.
No, I get that now, but what a disappointment. I love the idea of it being odd.
Well, we're odd people.
Yeah.
Anthony, thank you ever so much
Yay.
for your perspective, for your presenting it, for your bringing some fine friends with you. And we hope that you'll stick with us for the ride. Windsor Maidenhead has more claim to be part of the southeast than where I live in Woodstock in Oxfordshire, which is probably on the extreme fringes of the region. But there we are. Thank you ever so much. It's been really helpful. And I'd like, on behalf of SEEFF, to thank you all for coming as well. We have some people that are new and some people that have been with us for some time. And please don't forget to tell your friends as well. We work very closely with the East of England Faith Forum, which has regular things at Cambridge University. And if you want to be put onto the mailing list for that too, we can arrange that if you give us notice. Thank you all very much indeed for coming, and we hope you'll come again. And thank you, Anthony.
Okay.
Thank you, Anthony. Well done.
Thank you very much. Very good.
Thank you, Seamus.
I want to say hello to Rick as well. Haven't seen you for a while. Thank you for coming as well.
Hi. Thanks, Emma.
You all right?
Good to see you as well, yes.
Yeah,
And David.
same here.
Yeah.
Brilliant.